scoring guidelines. So there are 6 points possible here in the scoring guideline. And the general scoring notes responses should be evaluated solely on the rationale provided. Responses must demonstrate all criteria, including those with bulleted lists, in each row to earn the point for that row. Terms and phrases with the terminology list are italicized when they first appear in the scoring criteria. And if you look at the very end of the scoring criteria, all those italicized words will be defined. I'm not going to go through those definitions. If you need those definitions, feel free to look for them. Now, first, let's look at reporting category 1. This is called row 1, program purpose and function. You can get 0 points or 1 point. The scoring criteria. The video demonstrates the running of the program, including input, program functionality, and output. And, notice it's and, the written response describes the overall purpose of the program, describes what functionality of the program is demonstrated in the video, and describes the input and output of the program demonstrated in the video. So it not only has to have this stuff, but your written response must also state all that. Consider only the video and written response 3A when scoring this point. So both of these things have to be there together. Do not award a point if the following is true. The video does not show a demonstration of the program running. In other words, screenshots or storyboards are not acceptable and would not be credited. So this doesn't say that your program has to do anything special in particular. You should be able to get this point just by stating the functionality, the input, and the output. Next up, row 2, data abstraction. The written response includes 2 program code segments, one that shows how data has been stored in this list or other collection type, one that shows how the data in the same list is being used as part of fulfilling the program's purpose. You must identify the name of the variable representing the list being used in this response and describe what the data contained in this list represents in the program. Consider only the written response in 3B when scoring this point. Requirements for this program code segment. The written response must include 2 clearly distinguishable code segments, but these segments may be disjointed code segments or 2 parts of a contiguous code segment. If the written response includes more than 2 code segments, use the first 2 code segments to determine whether or not the point is earned. So notice, adding more stuff, anything after the first 2, they're not going to look at. The point will not be awarded if the use of the list is trivial and does not assist in fulfilling the program's purpose. In other words, having a list and looping through it and really not doing anything that has to do with the program will lose the point. Row 3, managing complexity. This is a written response. It includes a program code segment that shows a list being used to manage complexity in the program, and the written response explains how the named selected list manages that complexity by explaining why the program code could not be written or how it would be written differently without using this list. Only the written response in 3B will be considered. Responses that do not earn the point in row 2 may still earn the point in this row. So notice if you didn't get row 2, you still could get this row. Now notice all these do not awards. Do not award a point if any one or more of the following is true. The code segments containing the list are not separately included in the written response section, not included at all, or the entire program is selected without explicitly identifying the code. Be very careful. I've had, in some practice things, I've had students select their whole program saying, well, this way I'll make sure I got it all. No, that's too much. They're not going to search through it, okay? Just the code that needs to be selected. The written response does not name the list selected. Got to name it. It's got a name. It's got a variable name. Use the variable name. The use of the list is irrelevant or not used in the program. Okay, looping through all the classes that you're taking, but that has nothing to do with the code, that just doesn't do it. The explanation of how the list manages complexity is implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program. The solution without the list is implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program. The use of the list does not result in a program that is easier to develop, meaning alternatives presented are equally complex or potentially easier. The use of the list does not result in a program that is easier to maintain, meaning that future changes to the size of the list would cause significant modifications to the code. All right, so keep in mind the do not awards. Row 4. This includes 2 program code segments, one showing student developed procedure with at least one parameter that has an effect on the functionality of the procedure, one showing where the student calls it. So it's really the procedure and the call. Those are your 2 code segments. You also need a description of what the identified procedure does and how it contributes to the overall functionality of the program. This is 3C. The procedure must be student developed. This means this cannot be an on event. This cannot be an on event, and it cannot be the main code. This must be student developed. It could be developed collaboratively with a partner, but still you and or your partner must have developed it. If multiple procedures are included, only the first one will be used to determine whether or not the point is awarded. So again, don't include all your code, just one procedure. The code fee point will not be awarded if the code segment consisting of the procedure is not included. The procedure is a built-in or existing procedure or language structure, such as an event handler or main method, where the student only implements the body of the procedure rather than defining the name, return type, and parameters. Okay, on event, up button clicked, you didn't do all that. That's provided by the code. Okay, you didn't write the stuff that creates the button or the clicking. So it's got to be a procedure, not an on event. The written response describes what the procedure does independently without relating it to the overall function of the program. Okay, remember that if this is a procedure function. Think of a library. This is like a library function. It does something based on input, based on what's passed to it. Okay, so think about a function that you could write for a library, and that's what this is going to be. Now, algorithm implementation. This is that function, that procedure that you wrote. It should have sequencing, selection, and iteration. That means step-by-step lines of code, an if statement, and a loop. And you need an explanation in detailed steps how the identified algorithm works in enough detail that someone else could recreate it. Okay? Responses that do not earn the point in row 4 might still earn this point. Requirements, the algorithm being described can use existing language functionality or library calls, meaning this might be an on event, okay? And in the on event, you have sequencing, selection, and iteration. You would not get the point for row 4, but you could still get row 5 if you had this other stuff. An algorithm containing sequencing, selection, and iteration that does not contain a procedure can earn this point. Use the first code segment as well as any included code for procedure called within the first code segment to determine whether the point is earned. If this code segment calls other student development procedures, the procedures called from within the main procedure can be considered when evaluating whether the elements of sequencing, selection, and iteration are present as long as the code for the called procedure is included. Do not award. Okay, do not award. The response only describes what the selected algorithm does without explaining how it does it. Okay, returns the final grade. Okay, how does it return the final grade? What does it do? Adds up all the intermediate grades, divides by the total number, something like that. The description of the algorithm does not match the included program code. If you describe how something works and that's not how it works, you won't get the point. The code segment consisting of the selected algorithm is not included in the written response. The algorithm is not explicitly identified, meaning you just copied the whole program. That's not helpful. You need to tell exactly what the algorithm is. The use of either the selection or the iteration is trivial and does not affect the outcome. Okay, so got to make sure that your if statement and your loop are not just trivial. They're not just thrown in there because you need one, that they actually contribute to the functionality. And finally, row 6. This row, okay, the written response describes 2 calls to the selected procedure identified in response 3C. Each call must pass a different argument that causes a different segment of code in the algorithm to execute. Remember, you had to have a selection if statement. You need to be able to describe the conditions being tested by each call and the results. Now, responses that do not earn the point in row 4 might still earn this point. Do not award a point if any one of the following is true. A procedure is not identified in written response 3C, or the procedure does not have a parameter. No parameter, no point, just it's over. The written response for 3D does not apply to the procedure in 3C. Okay, so if you talk about something that's not in 3C, 3D is not going to get the point. The 2 calls cause the same segment of code in the algorithm to execute, even if the result is different. Okay, so the idea is that when you pass different arguments in, something different happens. The response describes conditions being tested that are implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program, and the identified results of either call are implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program. All of those will result in the point not being awarded. So, big things to look at as you write and you do your responses. Make sure that you stay away from any of the things that say do not award. Okay? There are times we still might not get a point, but if it's any one of those do not awards, it is so fast, so quick for them to just go nope and continue on. Remember, they're grading thousands of these things. Please give yourself that opportunity. Don't violate the do not awards. Now, hopefully you concluded that for the create performance task, you will need to submit a video showing your program's main functionality, including input and output, a PDF of your program code, and a PDF written response to those 4 questions that have multiple parts for each. You should also notice that the scoring guidelines provide specific guidance on how each part of the task will be graded, as well as how you can earn and not earn points. I'm sure that right now you have a lot of questions about what this task will look like and how it will be scored. Before we answer them, we're going to look at some examples, okay? Looking at some examples and how they were scored will go a long ways to settling the nerves and telling you what you need to do and what you don't need to do, right? So I'm going to stop this portion of the video, and then 1C, lesson 1C, we'll do the other. All right, so here we go, and pause.